right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our kickoff of the second semester of our Grow to Glow series. And again, we are just so delighted you could make time for us in your schedule. My name is Carolyn Taylor, and I'm in East Tennessee in Dolly Parton's hometown, Sevierville. And I am joined by my two wonderful professional learning and teaching teammates, Julie Pacheco-Toy and Alexis Buschert.
Hi, I'm Julie, and I am in Oregon, joining you from Wilsonville, Oregon, where it's an unseasonably sunny day today. And I'm so happy to be joining Lexi and Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Alexis, former Spanish teacher, also in Oregon. I'm going to be behind the scenes as the producer tonight, so I'll be watching that Q&A feature. Again, if you have any questions, there's a little box with a question mark in it. Just go ahead and throw the question in there, and we'll either respond to you there, or Carolyn or Julie will answer your question. Thanks so much.
All right. So before we get to today's main topic, we'd just like to do a quick recap of our 2025 Grow to Glow fall content. And if you were unable to participate in the fall sessions, you can download the webinar recordings and access those resources by going to the URL that Alexis will post in the chat for us. So here's the layout, the chronology here. And so I'm just going to say a quick bit about each of the four components. So to set the stage for our Grow to Glow PD series, the December resources we shared explore the value of developing intercultural competence. And the other piece to that was looking at the actful, necessful, can-do statements, both the language and the intercultural ones. So that would be a great resource for you to tap into to have that background knowledge to build on. Now in October, the resources that we shared centered on using those intercultural can-do statements. We dug a little bit deeper to really help you think about how students can use the can-do statements to self-assess and then reflect on their progress toward developing intercultural competence. Okay, and then in the November live webinar, Fostering Interculturality with AI-Powered Conversations, this provided perspectives and ideas for designing AI prompts for intercultural learning, and it featured our Wayside NULA News as part of our Nualang platform. And this is a resource for teaching with developing interculturality. And that brings us to December's live webinar. This featured a panel discussion on interculturality with world language educators from all stripes. So Allison Perryman, Ed Weiss, Peggy Malik, and Francisco Soranzo. Now, our main ideas, our big focus areas today, first would be to ensure that we have a clear understanding of the differences between cultural and intercultural learning experiences. So what do they have in common? How are they different? How does student engagement differ with each experience? And then our second topic, we'll be using a whiteboard that you'll have continuous access to after tonight, and we'll share collectively our experiences and maybe resource ideas that you have for student intercultural learning experiences, both within the students' communities and in the global community as well. So to kind of set the stage for us this evening, I think it's important that we think a little bit about the similarities, the differences, the overlap between cultural and intercultural learning experiences for our students. And so just a few main things I wanted to bring to your attention. When we think about those cultural experiences, as you glance through those 6 descriptions, you can see that it's really in more of a simplistic stage. But when we see how it then moves into the intercultural aspect, students are growing their understanding, using their language to connect with people from different cultures. Not only are we thinking about, the products, practices, and perspectives as we do with our 3 Ps and our culture standard. Now, when we shift to building interculturality, we really want students to compare and contrast those 3 Ps with their own lives, their own, lived experiences, dispositions. And I think you can see the collaborative nature running through that strand of interculturality. And what I love so much too is how that one of the added benefits is that we really help students build understanding, empathy for people who are different from themselves. Okay, and then just finally to underscore, to reiterate that those intercultural learning experiences draw heavily on students connecting their learning to their own life experience. All right, so with that in mind, we're going to challenge you to a little poll here. So what we'll do is do a bit of a formative assessment to see where you might be with you're recognizing the difference between cultural and intercultural learning experiences. So what we're going to do is share with you a series of 5 pairs of learning scenarios. And for each of the 5 pairs, we'd like you to identify which of the 2 learning scenarios is an example of intercultural learning experiences. All right. So here's the first one. Okay, so students watch a video and label traditional foods from Mexico, and next they classify those foods according to nutritional food groups. Okay, versus students compare foods from their own households to foods from Mexico and explain why certain foods exist in each place. And then they create a fusion meal that combines Mexican foods and ingredients with their own. All right, so take a second and let us know if you think option 1 or option 2 is an example of building interculturality. All right, woohoo! Okay, so the vast majority answered correctly. So number 2 is the correct answer. And if you think about, the difference between the 2, how again we're connecting, giving kids the opportunity to connect back to their own lives. Okay, all right, let's take a look at number 2. All right, so here you're going to see that students watch a vlog about the cultural significance of the Day of the Dead, and then they collaborate to make a classroom ofrenda, and then they bring or draw an item from a departed loved one to make papel picado, and then they add decorations. Now in groups, the students explain their item's meaning, and then they connect it to the tradition, and then they compare the Day of the Dead with American holidays such as, Memorial Day, All Saints Day, maybe even Halloween, so they can highlight the different cultural perspectives. All right, that's option 1. All right, number 2, students view images and complete a short reading about the Mexican Day of the Dead celebrations and cultural significance attached to it. Then they create their own ofrenda, papel picado, and discuss sugar skulls. All right, so what's your answer?
right.
Okay, so we see that the vast majority picked number one, and that's absolutely correct, because you can see how there's deeper exploration of the customs, the traditions, and the holidays. And again, bringing those products, practices, and perspectives back to students' own culture, their own lived experiences. Okay, 2 more to go. So, experience 3 here. Number 1, students share a family or community celebration using the target language, and then they explore a Francophone holiday through videos or readings. They compare traditions and discuss what each celebration shows about Francophones' people's values and their ways of life. All right, contrast that to number 2, students learn about the Chandeleur, so Candlemas, and this is an annual celebration that takes place on February 2nd. They read a poem about La Chandeleur, noting main themes and symbolism, like maybe references to the sun and the light. And then on February 2nd, they make crêpes in French class. All right.
This one's proving a little more challenging for people.
It is. It is.
Okay.
All right, so the answer is number 1. You know, there are some great things happening, learning experiences in 2, but let's tease out the main differences. So here, the students are looking at those celebrations, and then they're discussing what happens with those celebrations, you know, bringing in those 3 Ps, but then they're comparing those traditions and discussing with one another what each celebration shows about the people's values and their way of life. Okay? So in the second one, they're doing great things, right? They're analyzing a poem, they're noting those main themes, looking for symbolism, right? So great, you know, content-based, helping even their language 1 skills and ability for, you know, literary analysis. And then they make crêpes on February 2nd, right? So there's really no deep dive into the importance of those experiences or traditions linked back to their home, their personal lived experiences. Okay, so question 4. Number 1 would be students compare works by Impressionist artists, Marie Cassatt, she's American, right? And then Edgar Degas and Berthe Morisot, both French, to explore how artists from different cultural backgrounds used shared Impressionist techniques to express distinct cultural values and national identities. Okay, contrast that to number 2, the effects of snow. So students create Impressionist style paintings of winter scenes. They title their paintings and provide a description in French, and the paintings are displayed in the media center.
This one's a hard one too, for me. And not just for me.
Okay, so it is answer number 1. So if you think about that cross-cultural comparison and experience, you can see how students are able to, understand the different techniques that each artist use. And then within that experience, the types of values and national identities that those artists conveyed through their work. So as Americans, as French as well. Whereas the second one, it's a wonderful activity to reimagine, interpret an impressionist style painting and display those, right? Share that culture with the school community. But there's no opportunity to dig into impressionist art in, Francophone places, and then that of, the American Mary Cassatt. Okay, and it looks like we've got one more left. All right, so this one is going to be an example related to German. So after visiting a website about travel to and around Heidelberg, students identify the modes of transportation and use that list to create picture flashcards showing all the types of public and private transportation. And then the students use them to play a game of partner bingo to practice that vocabulary. Now, in example 2, after visiting a website about travel to and around Heidelberg, students compare transportation habits and city design in the German city with those in their own community, focusing on safety, environment, accessibility, and attitudes about public transit. All right, so here again, it is number 2, and we're seeing those opportunities to compare and contrast across cultures, which is the big differentiation between the two. Sorry, guys. All right, so now I'm going to turn things over to Julie, who is going to focus more in depth on local and global learning experiences for students. And she's going to share some examples from our basal series, so Entre Culturas, Entre Cultures, and Interculturel. These series really, I think, are going to give you a better and extended context for ways that students can engage with target language speakers beyond the classroom.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Sure.
So, yes, in Entre Culturas, Entre Culture, and Interculturel, in each of those chapters, in all 3 of those series, there is a section in the unit focusing on global communities. These sections allow students to apply their knowledge and their learning in real-world contexts, and invites them to interact with target language cultures beyond the classroom. They investigate products, practices, and perspectives with others in and from another culture. So now we're going to take a look at one example of an activity from each language series that supports students' interculturality, intercultural proficiency, and growth. And these activities are taken from various parts of the units in our textbook series. And I just want to point that out because the Mi Comunidad Global or Notre Communauté Mondiale, Unsere Globale Gemeinschaft, those are specific intercultural sections that invite students to interact with cultures beyond the classroom, but that's not the only place that interculturality is fostered through our series. It's really integrated in every part of each of the units. All right, so another way to think about the difference between culture lessons and intercultural lessons is that culture is the content and interculturality is what students do with it. For example, in this activity from Entre Culturas 1, Unit 5, students read about a musical genre called bachata. After reading, a teacher might choose to also play an authentic song by the singer mentioned in the reading to bring the topic to life for the students. For example, this is Romeo Santos. Oh, and it's not going to play in this. Well, you should look him up. It's pretty fun. If we were to just read the description and listen to the song, that might be a nice cultural lesson. But if we ask our students to make personal connections to their own lives and reflect on those connections, we can make our lessons more intercultural. Entre Culturas makes it easier for you to take those further steps by providing context and connections, and by inviting students to reflect on their own learning through intercultural I can statements, like the one here. I can recognize some similarities and differences between the Dominican Republic and my own community. But as teachers, how can we do that? How can we design a lesson that facilitates that deeper connection? On the next slide, we will suggest a 3-step process to do just that. In this 3-step process for teaching a lesson through an intercultural lens, we start with interpretive activities, which in this example include exploring a musical genre from the Spanish-speaking world. Then we move to an interpersonal activity in which students exchange ideas about similarities and differences between music in other cultures and their own. And finally, we culminate with a presentational activity, inviting our students to highlight their new understanding and the connections that they made. Now, let's look at an intercultural lesson from the Interculture Level 1 French book. This lesson is from Unit 4, a food unit, Bon Appetit. In this lesson, students learn about the Nutri-Score, which is a system invented in France and also used in Belgium and Switzerland to provide a simplified nutritional indicator on foods, sort of along the lines of the food pyramid that we use in the US. Okay, as you can see, the focus can-do statement for this series of tasks is, I can use French to investigate a tool for evaluating the nutritional value of foods. And the context provided is that after researching and learning about Nutri-Score, students will use it to promote healthy eating at their school. And again, like in the first example, we have our 3 steps. Step 1, again, is an interpretive task done in English in level 1, but starting in level 2 and beyond in Interculture, done in French. In this task, students work in groups to research how the Nutri-Score rates food's nutritional value from A to E. Okay. Next, students discuss how to apply the Nutri-Score characteristics to the foods they are learning in the unit through an interpersonal task. And finally, through a presentational speaking and or writing task, students create a visual presentation to display foods represented by each of the 5 Nutri-Score categories. Now we're going to look at one more sample lesson, and that is from Interculturel. Our last sample lesson is from the Interculturel Level 1 German book. It's from Unit 1, titled Wer bin ich? Who am I? and invites students to begin making connections between their own lives and the lives of others. So this is their first potentially their first intercultural experience in their level 1 German class. The intercultural I can statements for this lesson help students to focus on making historical and contemporary connections to German-speaking people in their own community or region, as well as how to appropriately introduce themselves to a German speaker. In this intercultural lesson, you'll notice that our order is slightly different. Step 1 includes both an interpretive and an interpersonal task. In Part A, students create a map showing the location of German language communities, both past and present. And in Part B, they share with their classmates and discuss new information they learned about their community and which local and regional organizations they would like to know more about. Step 2 can be an interpersonal writing or interpersonal speaking task, where students discuss how German heritage in their region has influenced their lives, their families, their traditions, and so on. And they can do that in the discussion forum on Learning Site or in class. And finally, step 3 is a presentational task. And again, it can be speaking and writing. Students create a video introducing and telling a bit about themselves to a German-speaking e-pal. They may also ask a few questions of their e-pal as part of that. So you have several examples now, both in the Wayside textbooks and not necessarily in the textbooks. And we just thought that we would share a few of the ways that we designed both local and global intercultural learning experiences for our students when we were classroom teachers. I forgot to mention earlier that I was a Spanish teacher for a very long time. And before I knew what the term interculturality was, I was trying from early on, trying to create intercultural experiences for my students. One example of a more local, of a more local activity or lesson that I designed was that I created a multimedia unit on the Christmas lottery in Spain, which brought in a variety of authentic resources and invited students to participate in playing a mock lottery in class. And we talked about how the Christmas lottery in Spain is about more than just playing a game and winning money. It really is a full holiday tradition that brings communities together. Globally, my global intercultural example is when I managed to set up a partnership with an English teacher in Chile, and we had a virtual classroom exchange with an English class in Chile. So even though I wasn't taking my students in that case to another country or another culture, they were still able to interact globally with people from the other culture.
I loved hearing about those experiences, Julie, and I can add a couple from my experience as a French teacher. I taught in Louisiana for a number of years, and one of the favorite things my students like to do, every Christmas time, I would take my students on a field trip to a couple of local nursing homes in the community, and there were quite a few Cajun French residents at the nursing home. And so we would sing Christmas carols together with the residents, and then we would have an opportunity to make a craft and, you know, drink hot chocolate with them. And it gave the kids an opportunity to connect with the residents and learn a bit about, you know, Cajun heritage, you know, hearing the perspective of what life was like. Growing up speaking French, Cajun French for the residents. And, you know, some of the students really as if they were just beginning their language study. We kept it really simple for them in terms of the engagement, whereas other students who had longer length of study could really talk about things that, you know, interested them and that the residents were, you know, willing and looking forward to sharing with them. So those were wonderful experiences. And then in terms of the, you know, global connections, I taught for a period. I taught English in France for a period. And then the school where I've stayed in contact with those colleagues, and they would bring their students for homestays. And so their students would stay with mine in their families, and then we would arrange some excursions and sightseeing. And the students oftentimes would go together on those field trips. And then in exchange, I would take my students to France, and then my students would stay with their exchange friends' families. And so to me, that was such an enriching opportunity for students to really connect with teens their own age and have those lived experiences that, you know, for some of those kids, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So anyway, those are some things that we wanted to share with you.
Mm-hmm. Lexi, did you want to share any of your experiences?
I think this is a great opportunity for our participants to start sharing.
Perfect. Which is what we're going to be doing next. So we are a little over half of our time. So thank you, Alexis, for paying attention to that better than I was. So we want to hear some of your examples and ideas for investigating interculturality locally and globally. We are going to give you some time to share your ideas on this Canva whiteboard. So you can access that using the QR code or by typing in, or actually I think Alexis is putting that link in the chat as well. So you can copy and paste that chat or type in the URL. I'm going to give you just a moment to do that. And I'm going to move to the next slide, but the URL and the QR code are also on the next slide. So don't panic as I move it. Once you get there, you should be seeing something. You should be seeing what you see on this screen right now with that Grow to Glow banner at the top. So these are a few notes about how to use this whiteboard. To move around the whiteboard, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can press the space bar and drag the canvas in any direction. You can also zoom in or out on a trackpad with the pinching action. Or on the keyboard, you can use press Control and scroll in or out. And then to share your ideas, you're going to duplicate a sticky note, move it to the appropriate column, and add a comment. You can also leave reactions on other people's sticky notes. So we would like to wrap up tonight's session with a closing thought about, let's see, I'm going to hide that, about why interculturality is so important in our world language classrooms. As world language teachers, our overarching goal is to guide our students to be able to communicate in the target language. ACTFL defines communication as knowing how, when, and why to say what to whom. It's not just about the words. So making interculturality central in our classrooms helps our students to become more effective communicators. All right, so we're going to share a couple of things about what is coming up in this series, this PD series, as well as others. So the next event in our Grow to Glow series on interculturality this year is a resource share in February. So we will be sharing resources about project-based learning, different ways to branch out into the community. So keep your eyes out for that, as well as the community as a living classroom. I love that concept. And in March will be our next live webinar, March 11th, Grow to Glow, Leveraging Interculturality to Promote Student Growth. So we will be looking more at the student experience in that one, looking at students as decision makers with their own voice, choice, and ownership, and promoting student self-reflection as a tool in growing their intercultural proficiency, as well as the role of can-do statements and portfolios, which our Wayside series makes easy for you to do. All right, and we would love your feedback on today's session. Alexis has put the link in the chat, or you can use the QR code or type in the URL. I'll give you a second to do that. And then on the next slide, we have a QR code and a URL for a certificate of participation, if that is something that you need for your professional development units. There is that. So you can download the certificate of participation there. And you also have that link in the chat. And then finally, we invite you to put on your calendar the next webinar, which is on March 11th at the same time, same place. You can register for the Grow to Glow, Leveraging Interculturality to Promote Student Growth at the link that Alexis just put in the chat. You will also receive invitations to register for that in the same ways that you received invitations to register for tonight's webinar. And there will be a recording of the webinar that will be shared with you in the next few days. And we just want to thank you once again for joining us tonight. We really enjoyed sharing this information and ideas with you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.